with which they disagreed.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. Welcome to the programme. It's Wednesday's programme. How are you? It's just after 5 p.m. We're live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, richieallen.co.uk and triggerwarning.tv. Looking forward to this programme. You can contact me now and for the next couple of hours on Twitter through @RichieAllenShow. That's my Twitter handle, @RichieAllenShow. Got a good one, I think. Let's do it.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yeah, what a show I've got. Coming up in the second hour, we'll be meeting a lady called Sabine El-Gemayal. She's a documentarian. She's a filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She's produced the film which I saw today called Generation Zapped, a documentary asking whether wireless technology is posing serious health risks like infertility and cancer. It is a brilliant film. I'm so glad I saw it in advance of speaking with Sabine. She's up in the second hour. But before that, Dr. Stuart Waiton returns to the programme. He's a really interesting guy. And when he was on the programme in June, the Twitter sphere, at least our Twitter account, went viral. You loved what he had to say about identity politics and about trying to criminalise speech. Now, Stuart will be talking about legislation going through Parliament today, which is trying to make misogyny a hate crime. So Dr. Stuart Waiton joins the programme this hour. It is Wednesday's show. It is September 5th, 2018. I'm Richie Allen. Welcome to the programme. I'll tell you what, we've had some day today, weather-wise. It's been lovely today. Lovely, very early autumn afternoon, 18, 19 degrees, and not much of a breeze, just a lovely day. A good day to be working, outdoors, but I was indoors for most of it. So, how are you? You well? Right, jump straight in then, because as you heard in the news just there, as you heard in the news at the top of the hour, well, there's only one story today. Only one. 1K.
Hello, very good afternoon to you. I'm Kay Burley. You're watching Sky News. It's 3 o'clock. We're live in Salisbury for you this afternoon as a huge breakthrough is made in the investigation into who carried out the nerve agent attacks in this city. Counter-terror police named 2 Russians they believe were responsible. The pair, who police believe travelled under aliases, were caught on CCTV in London, here in Salisbury, and even at their hotel. The first image of the perfume bottle thought to have contained Novichok is released as the Prime Minister reveals as evidence the suspects are members of Russian intelligence.
The government has concluded that the 2 individuals named by the police and CPS are officers from the Russian Military Intelligence Service, also known as the GRU.
Well, if the government says it, well, we'll just believe it, won't we? Yes, Kay Burley, well, she's out and about again.
On the road again. Just can't
wait to get on the road again. Rather bizarrely, Kay Burley is presenting her Sky News afternoon programme all day from outside a front door in Salisbury. A front door that used to be used by the Skripals, where allegedly 2 men that they've identified now used a perfume bottle to spray Novichok, rendering the Skripals, well, nearly dead. If you believe it. Let's go to the BBC. The BBC says 2 Russian nationals have been named as suspects in the attempted murder of the Skripals. The men using the names Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bashirov are thought to be officers from Russia's military intelligence service, as you heard Theresa May say just a moment ago. Scotland Yard and the Crown Prosecution Service say there is enough evidence to charge the men. They've given us stills. They've given us screen grabs from CCTV of the men in London, of the men in Salisbury, of the men entering a train station. So they have. So it must be true. The Skripals were allegedly poisoned in March with Novichok. The government has concluded that the GRU intelligence service is behind it. It wasn't a rogue operation, said Theresa May. It was approved at a senior level of the Russian state. We have to step up our collective efforts against the GRU, said Theresa May. What do I think? I suppose it's unsurprising that I think it's horse manure. There's no evidence, a few screen grabs, an empty perfume bottle, and isn't the timing oh so amazing? Russia began an aerial offensive in Idlib yesterday as Bashar al-Assad's government begins their operation to take back the city from the terrorists we, as in the UK and others, sent in to sack the country. Amazing timing, this. So do you know what I'm going to do, dear listener? I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to say nothing more about it because there isn't anything more to say about it. You either believe the government or you don't. I used to believe the government all the time when they told me about weapons of mass destruction and when they told me all the lies they told me about Muammar Gaddafi, and I just gave up believing them. So we'll leave the Novichok and the Skripals and the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales of the security services for the moment anyway. Now, I've spent years, it's a specialty of mine, trying to educate people, he says arrogantly, as to how the mainstream media works because I've worked at practically every level of it myself. I've written voluminous articles on it. Go to richieallen.co.uk. There are programs on YouTube where I use audio presentations to show what the mainstream media is and how it does what it does. And I have described it, or even prescribed it, as a 24-hour-a-day running serial drama / soap opera. You know, it's on in every house, and increasingly it's on in every public building, either Sky or BBC 24. I've done loads of work on this. It's very Orwellian. Do you know what, dear listener? There was a great example of what the media does and how it does it today, the 5th of September 2018. I'm always telling you that the news networks, which I listen to every morning, I listen to 3, 4, sometimes 5 networks almost simultaneously. I'm flitting around. And I've been telling you for a long time that they carry the same stories pretty much in the same order. What you're getting on BBC Radio and BBC television breakfast shows, what you're getting from BBC Radio and BBC TV breakfast shows, you're getting exactly the same on the Sky News Brexit show. Same story, same order. Now, Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism were always going to be the big breakfast show stories this morning. I wouldn't quibble with that, right? But around those two big stories, Brexit and Corbyn, the BBC breakfast shows, radio and TV, and the Sky News TV breakfast show, well, they have to put other stories around Brexit and Corbyn. Well, today, the BBC, in the form of BBC Radio 5 Live, whose editorial policy is fairly identical to Sky News in terms of their target audience, well, their programmes today were practically identical, and I'm going to demonstrate how right now. Here are 3 stories covered by BBC Radio 5 Live and Sky News, and dear listener, these stories appeared in the same order in the schedule and at the same times on both networks. You want to listen? You want the proof, do you? Because I don't offer you information and claim it to be factual without offering you some proof. I thought you might want some proof. Here's a health story on BBC Radio 5 Live today.
3 minutes past 7 now. This is a really interesting story. NHS patients in England to become the first in Europe to receive a new type of treatment for this rare form of childhood leukemia. NHS boss in England, Simon Stevens, says a fair and affordable price has been reached with the manufacturer Novartis.
NHS patients are going to be the first in Europe to get access to this amazing new treatment.
Brilliant. Radical new leukemia treatment on the NHS for children on Radio 5 Live. Exactly the same time on Sky News. Well,
this morning, a cutting-edge personalised treatment for a form of childhood leukemia is going to be made available on the NHS for the first time in the first deal of its kind in Europe. Now, this therapy reprograms a patient's immune system to target the cancer. Sky's Ashish Joshi has been following these developments. And Ashish, this is being heralded as really good news today.
Yes, Ashish Joshi has been following developments. Would you believe it? Same headline, same story at exactly the same time on the BBC, as I just demonstrated. Few minutes later, Sky wanted to talk about why restaurant menus should be compelled to list the calorie content of each dish.
Calorie counts to be listed on menus. Now,
calorie counts to be listed on menus. That's how we started the story.
Some places, McDonald's I think is one of them, have the amount of calories in each menu option written there so you can make a decision. But now the Department of Health wants all cafes, restaurants, regardless of how small they are, to put the number of calories next to each of their dishes. Now, I've been asking what people think about this. Thank you very much for getting in touch.
How lovely. Thanks for getting in touch. Exactly the same time on the BBC.
Calorie counts to be listed on menus.
Calorie counts to be listed on menus.
Obesity plan prompts cabinet split over burdensome costs. That's my usual co-presenter.
She's not even here.
She's not here.
Pretty uncanny that, isn't it? Pretty uncanny. Time for one more. We've got one more. Around about 1:45, the top of the hour, we had a Wizard of Oz story. A Wizard of Oz story. We're off to see The Wizard on the BBC.
A pair of ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in the film The Wizard of Oz has been found 13 years after they were nicked, Ellie.
The shoes were one of 4 pairs that featured in the 1939 blockbuster. They were insured for $1 million and they were in a museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And I've been speaking to John Miner, who's the curator of that museum.
Wizard of Oz on the BBC. What was on Sky at exactly the same time?
A pair of red
Your shoes.
Pair of red slippers.
Slippers.
Not yours?
Worn by Judy Garland, thank you, in The Wizard of Oz. They've been found 13 years after they were stolen from a museum.
That's Sky News. Remember BBC?
A pair of ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in the film The Wizard of Oz has been found 13 years after they were nicked.
A pair of red
Your shoes.
ruby slippers.
Not yours?
Worn by Judy Garland, thank you, in The Wizard of Oz. They've been found. Calorie counts to be listed on menus.
Calorie counts to be listed on menus.
And that is your mainstream media in the United Kingdom. Like I said, if you want to find out more about how it works, go to richieallen.co.uk. Go to the YouTube channel. I have broadcast extensively on this for years. Spooky, you might think? No, it isn't. The mainstream media is rubbish. It is the propaganda wing of the ruling elite. And I'll tell you what's happening there. It isn't journalism. None. There isn't a trace of it to be found on Channel 4, ITV, Sky or the BBC. What their producers are doing, basically Sky and the BBC have producers who get this shit from Reuters, from Associated Press and from other wholesalers of tat. Bureaus, which are wholesalers of news, of crap. Sky and the BBC are retailers and they are buying from the same suppliers. It is crap disguised as news and they don't care if you know it because they take no care in trying to prevent you from finding this stuff out. They just trust that you don't care. Right? Right. Share that with your friends when it's on YouTube. Now, the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, a Remainer, wants to stay in the European Union, and a provable bullshitter says the pound is toast if the UK leaves the EU with no deal. How can a credible broadcaster say that the Bank of England Governor is a provable bullshitter? Well, I can say it because every doomsday scenario laid out by Carney pre-Brexit hasn't come to pass. Carney said even before we left there would be financial Armageddon in the United Kingdom, and hasn't happened, right? Now, Carney's getting up the noses of the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg, terminological inexactitude, darling. Mogg says he should leave now. Carney's been talking, or maybe not Carney, but there's been speculation that he will extend his stay as Bank of England governor. People believe he's become too politicised and they want him to leave. People on the Brexiteer side of things. Nice to hear the journalist Martin Daubney drop a bit of truth bombing on Sky News this morning, and a conspiracy theory as well. Martin Daubney, journalist, on Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England.
Can somebody please tell Mark Carney to shut the up talking about
Well, he's
Brexit.
about to agree a longer term, so that might be difficult.
Yeah, precisely.
Apparently.
And it's like, look, every time this guy who's clearly anti-Brexit is a total Remainer, every time he starts talking down the pound slumps. Now, surely you would
But people
think...
do listen to him. He's the Bank of England governor.
The people who want to... I can't even talk. The people who want to run
out of steam,
on
you'd be talking.
sterling...
It's wrong, that's why it's
The
wrong.
people who want to make money out of the pound collapsing listen to what he says, because they take it as insider information. If the Bank of England governor has no faith in sterling, what are the markets going to do?
Brilliant stuff, isn't it? What Daubeny is saying there, and I presume the producer was screaming at the presenter, Sarah Jane Mee, through her earpiece to shut him up. What Daubeny was saying is, well, maybe I shouldn't say this. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth just a little bit. Daubeny is providing, or he's putting out there a scenario where Carney can let one or two well-chosen men and women know that he's going to make a public statement about the collapse of the pound in the event that the UK leaves with no deal. Carney knows that when he says that, way before we get to the deal or no deal scenario, that whatever he says is going to have an impact on the markets, right? So I wonder, would Carney be tipping people off? You know what? Tomorrow I'm going to make a negative statement about the health of the pound. What you might want to do is you might want to short sell the pound tonight. You see what's going on here? Nice to hear a bit of conspiracy theorising on Sky News. 19 minutes past the hour. This is the Richie Allen Show, live at the brand new time of 5 p.m. UK time. UK time, that is. 12 noon we begin every day, East Coast time US, and we begin at 9 a.m. Pacific time if you are listening in the US. I'm going to take a very short break. When I come back, I will be speaking with Dr. Stuart Waiton from Abertay University. Came on this programme in June. He was terrific, and it was terrific to listen to him talking about the implications of trying to criminalise, for example, at that time it was chanting on terraces by soccer fans. He got into how vulnerable groups have been created by progressives, by so-called leftists, and by doing that, by labelling certain groups as minorities and groups that need to be protected, it's having a very, very serious effect on free speech and on debate. He's a top man, and we're going to talk in a minute about the attempts by people like Stella Creasy to make misogyny, hatred of women, a hate crime, a crime to hate women. We'll be back in a minute with more. Keep the tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. As usual, it's brilliant to be with you today.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back. It is 22 minutes past 5, 22 minutes past the hour, depending on where you are. is your Richie Allen Show. We are live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, richieallen.co.uk, and of course, triggerwarning.tv, the TuneIn app. But I want to mention Cogent Radio. It's an app designed by Hayden Hewitt of LiveLeak fame, great friend of mine. It is a terrific app, and it does nothing. There's nothing sinister about it. It doesn't take any data from you. It doesn't ask for any data from you. It doesn't bombard you with ads. It does nothing other than play good radio. And one of the things I'm very glad about is that Cogent Radio carries this particular programme, the Richie Allen Show. So check it out, the Cogent Radio app. Right, so this is Ozzy Osbourne, obviously. It is Ozzy on the Richie Allen Show. It is Europe's most listened to independent radio show. That's a fact, by the way. Dr. Stuart Waiton, hate crimes being listed, being planned for misogyny. How serious is that? We'll talk about that with him in a minute and more. Keep the tweets coming in to @Richie Allen Show. Music from Ozzy Osbourne on the Richie Allen Show. It's fast approaching 25 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the programme. Don't forget, coming up in the second hour, we'll be chatting with the director of Generation Zapped. Top documentary, which is played at festivals across Europe this summer about EMF radiation. Terrific stuff. We'll be speaking with the director of that a little bit later on. Now, covered this at length yesterday, spoke a lot about it yesterday. The Labour MP Stella Creasy wants to change the law so that misogynistic behaviour is treated as a hate crime. She wants to amend new legislation that would ban taking unsolicited pictures under someone's clothing. Now, as I went to great pains to explain yesterday, that's already a crime. The draft legislation is being considered. As I speak, as far as I know, if I get any information, I'll bring it to you. How serious is this? Is it necessary? Let me welcome back to the show a man who came on with us back in June, and you loved him. Twitter went viral when he was on. He's based at Abertay University, top man, academic author and journalist. He's a criminologist. And when he talked about plans to criminalise terrorist chanting at football matches back in June, and talked at length about the creation of vulnerable groups and what that is doing for free speech and freedom of expression, it struck a chord with you. And that particular episode on iTunes and on Spotify was downloaded thousands and thousands of times. Let's welcome back to the programme Dr. Stuart Waiton. Stuart, welcome back. Hope you've had a good summer.
Yes, not bad.
And it's all work now, right? Because you're back presumably lecturing this week or next week. It all begins now, the fun.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes, the joys.
The joys of it. I'll tell you what we'll do, Stuart. Before we hear from you, and I'll be giving you the floor, I thought we might... I grabbed an interview from Louise Mullaney today. I don't know if you've ever come across Louise. She's a professor at Nottingham University, and she spoke with Radio 5 Live earlier on, and she tried to define the Nottinghamshire police definition of misogyny. There's about 90 seconds worth of audio here. If you don't mind listening to that, and then we might have a chat about it in a minute. Let me just get rid of the music first. That might be smart. So we'll hear from Louise Mullaney, or Mullaney. I think it's Mullaney. She's a professor at Nottingham University, spoke with the BBC earlier on, and first of all attempts to define what misogyny is.
So the way that it's been defined in Nottinghamshire by Nottinghamshire Police is a hate crime which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by prejudice on the grounds of somebody's gender. So it can be showing contempt or hostility.
So it's basically men hating women.
Yes, I mean it's called hate crime, but I think there's a misconception in the world about what hate crime actually is. It's not that you absolutely hate somebody. It can be contempt, it can be hostility, and it can be prejudice as well. So it's important to bear in that broader definition.
Okay, here's a little bit more of that.
How do you say that was? That was motivated by misogyny, because that's what you would need to do to prove that an offence had taken place, or to make sure that you were punished under this proposed new law.
So again, according to the Nottinghamshire definition, it's the perception of the victim or any other person, and that would be the same as the way that the police treat any other crime. So they'd look for evidence, they would interview people, they would try and find the perpetrator. It's not a change in the law that was brought in Nottinghamshire. A crime would still be classified as a sexual assault, that just the misogyny hate crime would be put on it as an additional category, partly as a publicity exercise to send the message that to women that this is taken seriously, this is something that you should be reporting.
Isn't that bizarre? To send a message to women that this is being taken seriously, we will label it misogynistic and we'll add an extra year or two onto a sentence. And finally, just before we hear from Stuart, Nicky Campbell, the co-presenter of that breakfast programme, he weighs in here, and this is interesting.
You say groping somebody in public. If a woman were to grope a man in public, can that be a hate crime?
Yes, it can. And under the law that's been used in Nottingham, under the policy that we've had for the police here, men are very much encouraged to report as well. It would be called misogyny to give it its official title.
Or a man groping a man.
Yes, absolutely. It's the same. The law hasn't changed at all, that if somebody perceives that they've been assaulted, then they should report it as a form of sexual assault. What we've found and what the police have found...
Sorry, is a man groping a man a hate crime?
If a man is groping a man inappropriately and the man perceives it to be based on their gender, then it can be.
Dr. Stuart Waiton, thanks for listening to that. That's all very bizarre. What do you think of it?
Well, it's part of the process of how it's actually what she was describing, I think, more was hate incidents rather than hate crimes necessarily, because for a hate crime, you have to actually have some sort of thing happen, whereas a hate incident is anything that anyone perceives to be hateful. So this is a huge problem with the sort of hate framework, that it's purposefully subjective. So if I say after this show that you were hateful towards me, that is a hate incident, regardless of what you've done. So you could have done nothing, but it would be recorded as a hate incident. And it's part of the process where the police are developing a kind of therapeutic relationship with people in what they call now who have protected characteristics or are vulnerable, or these other terms that are used. And they are, in a sense, the part of this is the kind of criminal justice system and the police trying to recreate a new image for themselves. So they're now much more sort of caring around politically correct type issues, anything to do with this term diversity, diverse groups, vulnerable groups, and so on. So if somebody says something's happened to them, you don't want to, as they call it, doubly traumatize them by questioning that this has happened. You have to accept that it's happened, irregardless of there's absolutely no facts, no objectivity, nothing at all. You have to accept it. It is a completely and utterly irrational framework for developing laws and an approach to recording crimes and incidents.
As a criminologist, Stuart, you and your colleagues must be scratching your heads at where this is coming from. Let me just get this straight. You just said there, you go away later and you say that Irish guy was hateful with me on the radio. Yeah. The police would then, they would listen to that and then they would go and try and find out, presumably I would be interviewed, and they would they try and ascertain or determine if there was any validity to what you had said? What would they do from that point, is what I'm trying to get at.
They wouldn't have said so. I mean, this is in the context of, I suppose, I'm jumping the gun and assuming that the kind of misogyny thing is going to be incorporated, because we would need that, or whatever the term was for men being unpleasant to men and so on. So if that happened, the point is that they would record that as a hate incident. So if the misogyny framework is accepted, that would be recorded as a hate incident. They would then look into it and then they would drop it. Right. So it wouldn't be recorded as a hate crime, but it would be a hate incident. So that then they would bring out a report at the end of the year and say there've been 15,000 hate incidents reported. So we would get a sense that society is full of hate. There's loads and loads of hate incidents and so on and so forth. And we kind of, we ramp up this sense that these different groups are all being hateful towards each other. So very unhelpful, as far as I can see.
Well, you've educated me there, and it seems that Stella Creasy and others, what they want to do is to prevent it being dropped, and they want a magistrate or a judge later on in the process. For example, if somebody upskirts. Now, I certainly don't want to make light. Look, I've never been remotely politically correct in my life. I'm not going to start self-censoring now. But I am going to honestly say that I wouldn't make light of some idiot sticking a camera under the skirt of a woman. It's a gross invasion of her personal space and privacy. I said last night, Stuart, and I suppose most people would agree, a very heavy fine in the first instance. And if the guy does it again, I would even suggest a custodial sentence, having been fined the first time. Where hate comes into it, I have no idea. But what Creasy seems to want to do in others is give a magistrate later on the power to believe the victim that this was motivated by hatred for her as a woman, and then presumably add on 6 months or a year or whatever. Am I getting it right?
Yes. Yeah. So so somebody does something like that. I mean, the problem I have with the upskirting discussion is that I think it's a panic. It's one of these things. Is everyone running around taking pictures of people upskirts? I mean, if they are, it's passed me by. I don't wear a skirt very often. It must be said. So perhaps
you don't wear a kilt.
That's why I'm being blasé about it. But it feels like something of panic made out of, if this is happening en masse, perhaps I'm wrong, but I suspect it's not happening. It's just something that someone's got a hold of. And then, as usual, we want a new law about it. I mean, I would say, you're saying you'd take it seriously and all the rest of it. I mean, the problem with stuff like that is, I imagine most times when something like this would happen, it's probably kids, right? Kids at parties, kids doing something, people who are like 15, 16, 17, 18, acting like idiots and doing something, probably not meaning anything about it, being a big man and so on. And then so I do have a problem that suddenly involves that girl thinks, oh, this is a criminal thing, we must go to the police, so on and so forth. I mean, obviously, if it's a serial pervert doing something, then I think you want to get the police involved. But this is a real concern, a huge concern about this development in terms of misogyny, because what we're looking at here is personal relationships, and people have personal relationships, and people have difficulties in personal relationships, and people break up with people, and people call each other names, and people say nasty things, right? About, it's like, who hasn't said something about, that guy is or this blokes, what are they like? Women, they're this, blah, blah, and when you're out with your mates and you blurt it, you say something. I mean, it must be almost universal, right? That we have lovers' tiffs, tension, and people bad-mouthing each other, right? Well, in the context of this law, if it becomes a law, that could then be used in the context of what you're describing as evidence that this is misogyny, right? So you call, the ex-girlfriend's a bitch, or she's a this or a that. Well, there you go. He called this person a bitch. That's misogynistic. Boom. This means that whatever he's done in the context of the incident at hand needs to be seen as a hate crime. How many misogynistic hate crimes are there? Suddenly go through the roof. Misogyny, wow, this is a huge problem. That proves misogyny is a huge problem. We need more policing of this. We need more awareness raising. We need to teach children about the dangers of what boys are like, etc., etc. And it's relentless. It's horrible, extremely problematic. It's almost making personal relationships into a borderline criminal activity, which is it's so destructive for human relationships and for society, as far as I can see.
And Dr. Stuart Waiton is our guest. I want to remind our listeners that on YouTube and on Podomatic and on iTunes, you'll find the previous discussion I had with Stuart about the creation of vulnerable groups, and this is following. It's a brilliant follow-up to that with what's happening. It isn't brilliant what's happening with at the moment, but it's a great kind of it's a great follow-up. These vulnerable groups that I could be talking through my backside, and I probably do quite a bit. The vulnerable groups having been created or being created all the time. Are we witnessing a phenomenon now where people are rushing to gain membership of these groups?
Yes. I don't know. Are you aware of the Big Brother?
I am.
Harry?
I am. I was going to bring that up. Go ahead, Stuart. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the names. It's my daughter who watches it, so she was on the ball with this straight away. So some guy in the Big Brother house does a play fight with some woman who's an actress, maybe, and sort of like kidding on, and I don't know, maybe he's like touches her arm or something. And it's all a joke. She doesn't, seems to think it's just funny. And then she walks away from the incident, as far as I haven't seen the videos yet, but I will do. As far as I understand it, she then kind of adopts the victim persona, and she says, "Oh, I think I've just been assaulted there," and starts to talk to the other people about that she doesn't feel safe anymore, and so on and so forth. And the other people in the house don't really know what's happened. The guy is sort of, he's kept separate from her. He now becomes paranoid that the world is looking at him as a sort of abuser of women, and apparently starts crying on air when he hears in the background, I think he's talking to Big Brother, and in the background he hears the crowd booing the woman rather than booing him, and he realizes for the first time that actually people don't think he's a mad, misogynistic beater of women. He's just a guy, and she's actually blown the whole thing out of proportion, and she's seen as the scumbag for playing the victim card. Now, what's fascinating about this is that it's almost like she believes she's a victim. I don't think she's just making it up. It's almost like it's kind of, there's so much kudos, and Big Brother, the way Big Brother's almost set up is to encourage tension and that someone's being victimized by somebody else and they're meant to be offended and outraged, and she adopts this persona, and it's such a beautiful kind of insight into our culture that is encouraging people to understand themselves, represent themselves, and experience things through this prism of victimhood, and then project it. What's so good about this is, of course, it's on film, right? People can go and look at it and say, actually, you're a nutcase, nothing happened, you're not a victim, you're actually destroying that guy, or potentially destroying that guy, which of course raises the question, how many other people in the kind of hashtag Me Too type framework are also adopting this persona, being encouraged to adopt this persona, which is so destructive to the individuals who adopt it, and so destructive to the other people who are being labelled as kind of harassers, abusers, bigots, and so on. So yeah, I think we've got a massive cultural problem, which institutions like the criminal justice system and politicians are making worse and worse and worse by introducing and promoting new laws like this, which encourage the idea that women en masse are vulnerable, that they can't cope and they need to be protected. So a culture of victimhood is strongly being encouraged in society. And that, as I say, that Big Brother incident was a fantastic little look at how this process works itself out, and how reactionary and how bigoted it actually is.
Two really interesting things there, very interesting stuff there. The first point, that it could be going on in workplaces around the country, and there might be less fortunate men than the gentlemen taking part in Big Brother. That's something to consider. But you must be encouraged by the public and even the media reaction to it. I mean, we don't want to see this woman annihilated or destroyed either. People are entitled to be fallible, to make mistakes and to do the wrong thing, and she shouldn't be destroyed for it. Yeah. But it's also encouraging that the wider public were kind of repulsed by it and have said, well, that's very wrong. So there's something to hang on to there, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. I think I was in a debate about the hashtag Me Too thing with mainly first year students. And at the start, there was a vote. I think it was something like hashtag Me Too is great for women. And at the start, I got virtually no votes, and almost half the people voted for the sort of hashtag Me Too thing. By the end of it, I'd completely won, because their presumption was just, well, what are they voting on? Is essentially that they don't think the harassment of women is a good thing, right? But the point is, nobody thinks that.
Nobody.
This is what's so ironic about this, right? It's like if this was the 1970s or earlier, right? You might think, oh, there's a real point here because women's position in society, men can be a bit pigs. There's a kind of sexist sort of underpinning to lots of things. I think today it's like we just don't live in that world. I mean, do people think sexual harassment is acceptable? I don't know a single human being that thinks that is acceptable. And yet we have this, because of what they now will say sexual harassment is, which increasingly expands, it can become almost anything. And therefore, we can have new laws and new kind of codes of conduct and so on developed around what is essentially a fantasy. And you're absolutely right. I think the majority of people look at this and think it's nonsense, which is, again, fascinating because it demonstrates that there is this kind of, if you like, this new elite in kind of culture and politics and institutions who spout this nonsense. But the rest of society, it's not part of what they are. There's a complete disconnect between the kind of this new victim vulnerability framework and the vast majority of people's everyday lives. Having said that, I think it's potentially insidious, especially for young people who are being educated about their vulnerability. They're being educated about the dangers of relationships and so on. So, I would be very interested if you took a poll of different age groups, and I would be fairly sure that if you go from age groups downwards, the younger you get, the more people accept this framework as being legitimate. That's when you need to be concerned.
I agree with that. And the point you made was excellent there about, the vast majority of people thinking it's nonsense, which flies in the face of claims by people like Stella Creasy, whom I don't know personally, whom I've never interviewed, to be fair, and she's not here to defend herself. But when she made comments to Sky News the other day, which I played on the programme yesterday, I found them incredible. I found it even worse, to be honest, that the presenter didn't have the moxie to just jump in there and say, Stella, I'd like some evidence to support that, please. She basically said that most women have suffered sexual harassment and or sexual violence on the UK streets. And to make it worse, she compounded that by saying, and their lives are being curtailed because of it. Now, that's an incredibly serious allegation to make. No comeback from the Sky presenter, who just nodded sagely as if this is all true, Stuart. I would, because I've asked women. We know women. We work with women. We work around women. We are with women, and we have female friends. And I haven't got a friend who says anything other than, yes, I have had the occasional catcalls from a bunch of lads who are maybe standing outside their office having a cigarette, or the stereotypical, the lads who are on a site nearby. I've had the odd wolf whistle, hey sexy, what are you doing later, this sort of stuff. And those women have said to me, to describe that as a crime, an offence or sexual harassment is absolutely ludicrous. Smile at it, say something nice back and keep walking. So the Stella Creasy stuff, it doesn't compute with me that women are in that much danger on UK streets.
Yeah, well, there's a potentially horrible class dimension to this as well, in terms of a kind of middle class, prissy kind of disdain for yobbish oiks who were a bit cruder. And the funny thing is, it's like you're basically a lot of kind of like, well, sort of like, I don't know what's the term for it, but kind of like rougher working class lads and lasses collectively will not think any of this is meaningful or matters or whatever, and they're a bit cheeky or a bit cruder or a bit whatever. But for your kind of Oxbridge middle class ends up as a journalist or as a researcher or a university professor. The kind of there's a kind of snobbery associated. I tell you how it works though, in terms of what she was saying. Because she was telling the truth, when she says the vast majority of women have been sexually harassed, but telling the truth in the framework of the advocacy research that is used. So I'll give you an example. The NSPCC did some research, so-called, it's a while ago now, about 15 years ago, And the question they asked was, have you ever been touched by anybody when you didn't want them to? And they asked lots of different age groups this. Have you ever been touched in a sexual manner when you didn't want you to? And they found lots of people had been touched when they didn't want to. And their conclusion was the biggest abusers of children are children, and more specifically, the biggest abusers of children are people called boyfriend and girlfriend. In other words, what they were describing were teenage and young adult relationships when one of the other partner touches them when they didn't want them to, right? Which, this will happen in many, possibly most relationships where you kind of like take the next step and so on. But the framing of their questions meant that was incorporated as sexual harassment and child abuse. And that was how they got their results. The biggest abusers of children, sexual abusers of children, are boyfriend and girlfriend. Completely mad. And
very sinister, Stuart. It's obviously very sinister because it sounds like that was the predetermined result they wanted by the way it was framed.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It's advocacy research. If you frame the questions using a certain type of sort of feminist methodology, and hey presto, you get these results which you can then flag up and say, terrorize the world that children are all sexually abusing one another. It's horrible.
Insane, this. Dr. Stuart Waiton is our guest. We've got about 3-4 minutes left on this. 3 minutes. I have a question. I want to finish with this. Thanks for coming back, Stuart. I know you are busy. I'm not being mealy-mouthed about that. I know you are busy with the term. Well, it's not the term, of course, in uni, but you've got a lot to do. So I'm going to ask you this. I've heard from academics across the world talking very nervously about the credit score system, the social credit system in China. This where people are ranked. It's dangerous stuff. It's beyond dangerous. I won't get into it now. But are we going, if this continues down the path it is going, are we going to end up in the very near future in some Orwellian system where we do have a type of social credit system where some bloke, because he's expressed some of the silly stereotypical things you identified earlier on, women should really just stay at home, or I don't believe women should be driving these big heavy lorries or whatever. Are we going to get to a stage where that person who has expressed, either joking or not, those opinions might find himself in trouble in a future social credit system where, well, you don't have access to this anymore, you have to be silenced now, we're going to turn off your access to social media? Could we end up there, Stuart?
Well, I think we're already there. I think the difference is that we know how it works, and so we tiptoe around one another. I mean, people. My partner makes one. She works in IT, and she makes the point that if people listen to the conversations that she has with the guys, because there's double entendres like spat out every 5 seconds about just about everything, she said they would probably all get sacked. It's just, people find a way to know who they can trust, which of their colleagues you can and can't say things in front of. And unfortunately, if you say the wrong thing in front of the wrong person, you'll make sure you get ticked off and probably have to go to some sort of awareness training course. So I think we're already in a situation where relationships between people are highly regulated and usually self-regulated. And potentially the danger, I think, where it will become most problematic is when people and children get criminal records or wider records that are increasingly held on databases, and that is they have to carry that with them potentially for the rest of their lives, which could entirely impact on their capacity to get jobs, certainly in professional sector, certainly in the state sector, and potentially in other places as well. So I do think it's something that we should be concerned about now, and we should be trying to challenge.
Well, thankfully, there are people like you still in academic institutions in this country asking these questions, Stuart. Listen, mate, thanks for coming back on. The best of luck in the coming weeks. Is there, I mean, I have put out links to your books before, and I will do again before the end of the programme. Is there somewhere online that people can find you?
They just put my name. My name's so weird. Stuart Waiton. There's only one of me as far as I can tell.
There's only one, yeah.
So if they Google me, they'll find me.
Great stuff, Stuart. Thanks a lot for coming back on. Fascinating stuff, very important.
Yes.
Cheers, mate. Bye for now. Stuart Waiton, Dr. Stuart Waiton, Abertay University. He's a criminologist, lecturer. He's an author and a journalist. Fascinating books about this. Check him out online, Stuart Waiton on Google. As he said, you'll find out all about him and his books as well. It is 7 or 6 minutes even to the top of the hour. It is Wednesday's programme, the 9th of... It isn't the 9th, you see, I get caught. It is the 5th of September, 2018. This is your Richie Allen Show. Lots of comments came in there, lots to talk about. Don't forget, coming up in the second hour of the programme, I'm going to be talking to fascinating film director based in Los Angeles who's directed a new documentary called Generation Zapped, which investigates whether wireless technology is causing serious health problems like infertility and cancer. It is a brilliantly made film with absolutely top-end production values. It belongs in any cinema in the world. And the director of that film will be talking to me in the second hour. Before we go any further, though, going to take a very quick break. Back in exactly 90 seconds.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
You know, we talked a lot about the social credit system in China on the programme in the last year. Max Egan was on the programme talking about it extensively, and one or two other guests as well. If you don't know much about it, look it up and read about it. And in fact, I might try and do a show. When I say do a show, I might try and do an hour on what's happening there next week. It's a reputation system basically for individuals developed by the government in China. It is absolutely sinister in the extreme. It really is. A social credit score for every man and woman in China. And it is, well, it's ultimately Big Brother on steroids and then on even more steroids, you know, which will lead to people in that country being terrified to breathe wrong, to sneeze in somebody's general direction. It's crazy stuff. I won't get into it too much here. I've not prepared much. I mean, I can talk about it, but I'd rather have one or two bullet points prepared beforehand. But it is coming in here. Well, Stuart Waiton clearly said there, Dr. Stuart Waiton, that it is here already because people are self-censoring in ways that people thought would never be possible thinking and thinking and thinking before they say what they feel. Looking around, well, who's here? Well, I can't say what I feel in front of him or in front of her because it could have profound consequences for my future in this firm, or my future in this university, or my future in life, which is where we're going. You know, it is very, very possible that very soon, if you hold ancient stereotypes about anybody, and you and I can say all day long, well, those stereotypes are they are immature, and they are silly, and they are outdated. We might say that, and we probably would say, I don't know anybody who genuinely thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to pursue careers wherever they want to pursue careers. I don't know too many men who think like that. Now, I'm sure there are men who think like that. There might be women who think like that. But when you do meet people like that, you don't disown them. If you like them, and if they're your friends, you don't disown them because of an opinion you disagree with. It's like, Bill, come on, will you? You sound like your granddad. End of story. But what they want to introduce, they want to legislate for Bill, and basically to criminalise Bill for having what we would have thought as an outdated and fairly harmless stereotype. And that could play into a future social credit system here. We don't like what you're thinking. We don't like what you're saying. Therefore, for the next few weeks, you're banned from this. You're not allowed into any of the city's restaurants. You can't eat out in public for a month because you've been saying things like what we described Bill might have said just there. It's mad, folks. It's the top of the hour, by the way. It is 6 p.m. UK time, British summertime still, and it has been a lovely day here in the great city of Manchester. It is September 5th. This is the Richie Allen Show. The children have been back in school, mostly across the city, for the last few days. God help them. Third level students coming back next week, I think. Is it next week or the week after? Things seem to be back to normal in the city. Right, tell you what we're going to do now. I'm going to read some Twitter comments. Let me read some Twitter comments. Bob Stew says, I've worked on building sites for years. There were women on the sites regularly, and the banter back and forward was really funny, and the women gave it back just as hard as it came. Nobody got offended or got insulted, said Bob there. Faisal is talking in a conversation that I'm not privy to at the moment, but I'll read his comment anyway. He says, on the one hand, you have violent crime rising again in London, but they want to waste police resources on upskirting and off-colour comments. That's a very good point. Stabbings are on the increase. There's no doubt about that. Now, there are many socio-economic reasons for why people would join gangs and all of that. We won't get into that now. But the fact is, stabbings are on the rise. But an inordinate amount of time is being directed towards upskirting and off-colour comments. Faisal is absolutely right there. Paul Craven says we all live like meerkats in this Hunger Games society. He says all this victim culture is going to make the courts in this land very busy. Maybe that is the plan, he said. Ricky says, hi Richie, I would love to be a woman with all the compliments they get. He says, laugh out loud. David Stanford tweets, trying to jump on the Me Too gravy train. After all, going on Big Brother is trying to waft the dying embers of a career into life, is it not? Says David. Moinga tweets, I agree with Stuart Waiton. Relationships will now have state laws governing us all. Hi to Coca Bell. Hi to Andrea Smalley. How you doing, Andrea? Hi to Paul. Poor old Nicky Campbell. His brush with sexual harassment saw him jumping on the Me Too bandwagon. But who knew it would lead him to this bizarre, rather unhealthy obsession with being touched. Played some audio from Nicky Campbell earlier on, speaking to a Nottingham-based academic about all of this. And Richard Kinsit, how you doing, Richard? Asks a good question. Could this Me Too stuff and this misogyny stuff be crime farming, as evidenced by Mark Windows in Kent? And of course, Mark was on this programme several times. Check out windowsontheworld.net. Very good journalist is Mark. Mark Windows, windowsontheworld.net. Appreciate that, Richard Kinsit. Right, we better move on then. And I think we better take some music, hadn't we? But I don't have any. So I'll have to get some to bridge the gap between between misogyny and moving on to microwaves and EMFs and a brilliant documentary that I saw a little bit earlier on today. It was marvellous to be able to watch the film today in advance of Sabine coming on. Generation Zapped is the film, and we're going to be talking about it with the director of it in a couple of minutes' time. So here's a bit of Dire Straits then and Sultans of Swing. And just in the nick of time as well. Top music this on your Richie Allen Show. Always great to be with you. Back in 3 minutes.
You get a shiver, he can play the honky-tonk line.
Music from Dire Straits on the Richie Allen Show, Sultans of Swing. We're coming up for 6 minutes past the hour for Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. Huge interest in the first hour. Even more interest in what we're going to be discussing right now. Can't wait to speak with my guest this hour. Came across a film online a few days ago called Generation Zapped. Now you can read all about the film at generationzapped.com. That's all one word, generationzapped.com. And thankfully I was able to watch a screener of it today. It's a documentary, it's new, and it investigates whether or not wireless technology has serious health implications for humanity, whether it's causing diseases, whether it's causing infertility and cancer. The film is outstanding. I said at the beginning of the programme, its production values are top end. It's a Hollywood film in terms of the way it's been produced, and that's hugely valuable these days when talking about these subjects. The director of the film is going to speak with me now. She's been very kind, so she has, and has given me a discount to give to you, where you can go on the website and order the film and get a 20% discount. And I'll put that information on Twitter and on my website a little bit later on. Let's welcome the director of Generation Zapped to the programme. It's Sabine El-Gemayal. Sabine, if I have pronounced your surname wrong, feel free to tell me now. How are you? Did I get it right?
Hello, it's totally fine. You pronounced it right. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's an honour to have you. And when I said the film is outstanding, it's outstanding. It really is. And I want to first off start with asking you a question you're probably sick and tired of answering, but I've got to ask it anyway. I understand your daughters were instrumental in you getting interested in this subject. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In 2013, 2012, right about there, my son was graduating from 6th grade going into 7th grade. And most of the kids were getting iPhones as graduation gifts. And at the time, I was concerned with screen time, so I just didn't see the point of getting a phone so early. And then I was visiting schools for him to go into middle school, and it was the year, actually it was 2012, because it was the Los Angeles School District iPad rollout, where they were giving iPads to all the students and going into more of a digital classroom. And in visiting the schools, I just saw a classroom with all the students with iPads and a smart board, and it just really shocked me, thinking, oh, not only they're all getting phones, but now they're going to be on screens all day. And that was my first concern, was about screen time. But then when I became aware of radio frequencies and exposure to radio frequencies, seeing that classroom, it just felt like a mini microwave for me. And that's actually how the movie came alive in my mind. And there is an animation in the film about it turning into a microwave, because not only they're all using devices, radio frequencies are cumulative. The more devices you have in a classroom, the more they connect to the router, the more exposure you get. And if on top of that, all the students have phones on vibrate mode in their backpacks, it's just really a microwave oven. So that's why they were instrumental in making me aware of that. And because they thought I was this crazy mom having this very Los Angeles lifestyle of eating organic, fitness lifestyle. they just didn't take me seriously. They thought it was just yet another thing that mom is doing. And so I thought, you know what? I'm a filmmaker. Let's just make a movie about it. And that's what I did.
Yeah, I liked today. You told me with tongue in cheek, I think, but also seriously, that you're a filmmaker who's become an activist, not an activist who's become a filmmaker. There is an obvious distinction, and I have no doubt. Look, the film is brilliant. It's brilliant, you know. And I want to say this: when I heard the classroom described as a microwave oven on low power in the film, I took a sharp intake of breath today, because I hadn't considered that before. And I thought, wow, that's a staggering thing to consider if you're a parent with young children, that your children are in a microwave for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And we'll come back to that. I wanted to ask you, was it difficult to make in terms of, I'm so enamoured of the film. I'm going to keep saying how brilliant it is because I mean it. No, I really mean that. And I know you've approached it obviously as a filmmaker, but also as a journalist. And I know you've given everybody the right to have their say or right of reply. Were regulatory authorities and government health officials, were they reluctant to talk? Did you find it difficult to get people to go on the record, including the cell phone companies?
Oh, absolutely. No one from the cell phone companies, whether AT&T or Verizon in the United States, were getting back to me. I had a contact in France because I'm Franco-Lebanese and speak French, so I tried to contact orange.fr and through a personal contact, but no one would come on records, although the person I was speaking to clearly recognized the health impact from radio frequencies. I actually spoke to someone at FCC that unfortunately I can't give the name, who agreed, who is actually a tech person who does their reading and who worked at getting the standards, and who clearly himself thinks that the standards are totally outdated because we did not have the wireless infrastructure that we have today. We didn't have all those iPads and iPhones and computers and Wi-Fi everywhere and WiMAX. And so he is totally on board with how overexposed we are. And he said to me, if my boss at the FCC agrees for me to be interviewed, I will. And unfortunately, I was going to DC to interview Dr. George Carlo. I tried to get an appointment. I spoke with that head, that executive at the FCC. And unfortunately, once I was in DC, somehow he was not available. Somehow he was always in meetings. Somehow I could never get to him. And so, I thought to myself, I think it's pretty obvious that big corporations or the governments have their own agendas. And it felt that it would be acceptable to not have them in the film because it's so obvious that they have their own agenda as a corporation, which is why at the end I have this this disclaimer that the FCC denied to have an interview, and I have an email from it, because they think that cell phones are safe, so they don't see the point to give an interview.
No, it's brilliant. I've been a journalist for 20 years. There aren't too many real journalists in the independent media, and I admire it. You're absolutely right. You've done the due diligence. You've given them a chance. I'll tell you what's extraordinary about this film and why people have to see it. Go to generationzapped.com, folks. Buy this film. I'll give you a discount code later on, generously given to me by Sabine. You've got to support films like this. I'll tell you what's amazing about the film. You demonstrate and you prove that these companies have been aware in the past that there are health risks associated with exposure to microwave radiation. And you've brilliantly done in the film, you've introduced academics from Ivy League universities, from big universities, who've actually conducted controlled experiments over the years that prove that this is having an effect on our biological makeup. That's brilliant. Talk about that, Sabine. All that information is out there.
Thank you. It was very important, there is I would say an aura around radio frequencies and cell phones and about conspiracy theories and movies that go in on the conspiracy theory sideline. And it was really important for me to not go there and to actually give, well, you know, a movie always has an opinion, but to try to not bring in my opinion and let the audience make their own opinion from the different interviews. And in order to do that, I really had to get the top top experts. There's Dr. Igor Belayev and Dr. Leonard Herdell, who were two experts along with Dr. Jonathan Samet at the EMF project of the World Health Organization. Now, some people will say the World Health Organization is biased anyway, and there's a revolving door, and the people who are working at the World Health Organization, some of them were working in the industry, telecom industry. It's true. However, those experts still, despite that, the World Health Organization classified radio frequencies as a class 2B carcinogen. And for the people who don't know, a class 2B carcinogen is possibly carcinogenic to human. A class 2A is probably, and that's where people are playing on words, whether it's possibly or probably are carcinogenic. But as you see in the film, the expert that did this study years ago, over 10 years ago, and classified as a possible, are now saying that it should be a probable carcinogenic to humans. So they actually came on camera and said that. And that for me was huge because they have a lot of credentials and credibility.
Well, you must have been. There's a saying in England. I mean, I'm an Irishman, but there is a saying in England. It's a gobsmacked. It's when your jaw hits the floor. When you were interviewing these learned men and women, and they're saying to you that they believe that exposure to this technology is harmful, not possibly, but probably harmful to human beings. And then you, Sabine, then as the mom and as the filmmaker, you look around you. So you finish one of those interviews, you walk outside, there are cell phone towers every 100 meters, they're everywhere. It must have been a horrifying thing for you to hear this stuff.
It is. But at the same, it's horrific, and especially now in the United States, they're going to have the 5G rollout. And in the movie, I explain what 5G is. Basically, 5G has a shorter wavelength, so they need more cell towers to carry the waves, and because that waves are they don't travel through walls or things like that, you need much more of them to have a higher speed, more downstreaming, especially with the Internet of Things going into the home and people having a lot of smart things in their home. They need more of a broadband. And so this is this is very, very scary because they're putting them on lampposts and mailboxes in front of people's home, and there's going to be like a gigantic grid, and Los Angeles is one of the 10 test cities coming up. So that is very frightening, and I don't know that my little film is going to make much of a difference for that. But where the film can make a difference and where I try to stand, because once you can really feel disempowered in front of the big corporation, disempowered in front of all those cell towers. How are you going to bring them down? And it's easy to kind of give up. But I think that if one can make changes in their own lives, at their own level, in their own home, with their own family, then that's one step towards change. So, for instance, rather than freaking out about it, I came home and I explained it to the kids, and I said, okay, first of all, you're not sleeping with it under your pillow. You're not carrying it on your body. And when you're in the class at school, and first of all, just for the record, I do give in as a mom to technology because I want my kids to be socially interactive with their peers. And if they don't have a cell phone, they're really disconnected from their peers. So they got a cell phone at age 15. That's my limit, which I think is a record, given that now they get cell phones at 8 years old. So,
Yeah, they do. You're right.
But my daughter, who's 13 now, has an iPod, so she can communicate. But the point is that there's not, she doesn't have access to the cellular plan. So when there's no Wi-Fi, she doesn't have access. As for my boys, definitely not carrying in the pocket. And when they're at school or at home, it has to be on airplane mode unless they're using it for work or texting, or even when they're working on their computer doing their homework, the Wi-Fi is off at school and at home unless they need to go on the internet and browse. So this is, I don't think one can be completely cut off from reality, and I mean, some people can. I think 90% of this population doesn't want to give away their privilege of technology. And some of them are willing to monitor their use so that they can use it in a safer way. And that's the message of the film.
Absolutely right. And that's stated clearly on the website generationzapped.com. Sabine El-Gemayal is live on the line from Los Angeles. She's directed this terrific film. I would call this a siren call, this film, for parents and for everybody really, about the dangers of Wi-Fi technology, of microwave radiation. It's generationzapped.com. I've just tweeted a link to the film and the discount that Sabine gave me earlier on, a discount code which is case sensitive, which when applied will give you 20% off buying the film. Buy the film and have a screening for your friends. You know, do that. This is deadly serious. It is deadly. It has deadly implications for people. Sabine, have you ever known anything as addictive, or anything that has had such an impact on our young folks, on our young children, our young boys and girls? Because I think you and I are of a similar age. I was born in, I shouldn't say when I was born, because now you'll think I'm insulting you when I said that we're of a similar age. But look, I grew up, I was a child in the 80s. I think you were a child in the 80s as well.
I'm from, I'm over 45, if that makes it easier.
Yeah, we're close enough. Yeah, we're Generation X, us. But the millennials, it's almost toxic. I mean, we see these queues that go on for miles. We see late teens, early 20-somethings prepared to sleep outside a store for 3 days to buy this stuff, to buy the tablets, the latest smartphones. I've never ever known anything so compulsive where they just have to have it. And we hear these reports, we read about them checking it up to 500 times a day, spending 2 hours a day on Facebook. Have you ever known anything in your time so addictive as these phones and these gadgets?
Oh, in my times? No. Definitely not. Definitely not. And actually, Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who features in the film, is a psychiatrist who deals with teen addiction to mostly video games and screens. And at the time that I was making the movie, in interviewing her, I was really very much interested about the physiological aspect of addiction and how it's actually affecting children's brain, the front lobe, and how they have that the empathy part of their brain is not developing when they spend too much time in bliss of video games. Actually, recently in the last, I think it was in May, the World Health Organization actually have a gaming disease. It was in, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact terminology for it, but gaming disorder is now in the list of international diseases, and it has to be taken into account by insurance companies. Now, we have a very strange and unfortunate healthcare system in the United States, as you may very well be aware of. It's not like in Europe where it's subsidized or you have more help. And so that's a huge thing. And when Victoria Dunkley was explaining it to me and how the brain doesn't develop as much, this is what's very scary to me, of how it acts, and I'm quoting her, the addiction to cell phone is like an opioid addiction. It has the same impact on your brain than an opioid. This is dramatic, and I actually have that interview in the bonus section, the extended interviews in the DVD. We have a bonus section. I included that part in the extra interviews. I couldn't put it in the movie because the subject was not addiction. It was
the physiological effects. Yeah. This is great stuff. It's good you're bringing up the video game addiction, which we've covered here on this program. And you're quite right to say that studies have proven that there is a physiological effect on the brain of children, not only addicted to video games, but children addicted to using smartphones. And it's very scary. And one of the brilliant things about your film, it isn't in any way hysterical. It isn't in any way fear-mongering. It's factual. You're presenting the most credible voices that you could possibly present to talk about the effects that these devices are having on our biological makeup. It's brilliant. The fact that it's messing with the empathy of children. You see, the conspiracy theorists, well, they will jump up and say, well, surely the manufacturers of this technology will know that it's having an effect and preventing people developing empathy, which is obviously a vitally important human characteristic. But I know you don't deal with, and you don't want to deal with conspiracy theories. But the fact is, there are people who will think, well, they will know what this is doing to people, but maybe profit, maybe something else. Maybe they turn a blind eye to this. Sabine El-Gemayal is our guest. GenerationZapped.com. On my Twitter page, pinned to the top, is a link to the film and a code for a 20% discount. I want to talk about electro-hypersensitivity. It's such a terrifically paced film. I don't want to say movie because it's a film. And meeting Amber and Jamie, who's dealing with electro-hypersensitivity. Many years ago, Sabine, I would have been very dogmatic, and I would have been a very pragmatic man, and I would have said that people like Jamie, they've got some sort of psychosomatic thing going on. Hypersensitivity, electro-hypersensitivity doesn't exist. It's all a nonsense. But I lived and I learned, and I don't believe it's a nonsense. Talk to us about electro-hypersensitivity, why it isn't given any credibility by the medical authorities or establishment, and how common we think it might be amongst people who are exposed to it. Talk about that. Brilliant in the film to meet those people. Go ahead.
Thank you for asking, because believe it or not, when I started the movie, I had the same impressions. And, they have, electrosensitive people have this label of being tinfoil hat people. And I was and people were telling me, yeah, you're doing an educational film, but you know what? You need to find people who are credible. Electrosensitivity is not credible. And I'll tell you, I didn't get a number of grants to make the movie because I didn't have a personal story. And when I included the personal story of some people with electrosensitivity, I would get backlash that it was psychosomatic and nothing was proven about that. Until I went to the Paris Fifth Appeal Congress in Belgium, where I did a lot of my interviews, and listened to all those experts and how the difficult and how they're trying to make a diagnosis of it. It's very new, I would say, or they would say, that there's about 5% of the population, which is enormous, that is medically hypersensitivity, and they don't know about it. Although everyone is to some level, everyone does not have the same symptoms, and typically the symptoms of an electrosensitive person, it can have various range of symptoms, which is why experts are dismissing it. It can be headaches, nausea, skin rashes, and it has this debilitating effect of basically overstimulating the brain. And I had an aha moment when Dr. Martin Blank, who unfortunately now sadly has passed away, when he explained how we are electrical beings. We are made of proton and electrons. We have positive and negative, which is why medically we react well to electrocardiograms and electroencephalograms and things like that, because we are electrical beings. So it totally made sense that if we are electrical beings, then we would be a conductor, and then we would be affected by external elements, whether it's overexposure to metals from ingestions, or toxic chemicals in the house, and why not radio frequencies is the same principle. So in meeting with Jamie, I was amazed that, and I'm sorry, the reason I'm mentioning conductivity is because when we have it appears that when one has too much metal in their body, they're a conductor, so they become more sensitive to electrosensitivity. It's Dr. Dominique Belpomme actually tried to establish some biomarkers, and he noticed that some of his patients who were electrosensitive either had more metal, too much metal in their bodies, or they were affected by their VGCC voltage gated calcium channels were affected by their exposure to radio frequency. So it's the calcium levels in the cells, because the cell kind of protects herself from the from radio frequencies coming in. So she closes down. So it has a lot of effects, whether it's oxidative stress, which then have a lot of it gets very technical.
It's very technical, but I am with you, and if you've got me with you, you're doing well, because I'm not the most technically minded. It's fascinating, electro hypersensitivity. I have no doubt that the symptoms experienced by Jamie, featured in the film, are real. I've spoken to one or two people who are affected by it on this program. You said something there about people with more metal in their system. This is in no way a loaded question. It's a genuine question. How could one person A, have more metal in their system, in their bodies, than person B? What are the common ways of being exposed to metals?
Oh, well, it's in the water, it's lead, it's iron, it's copper, it's, I had mercury fillings. I'm not, before I got pregnant, I got worried about mercury, so I removed all my metal fillings before I got pregnant. So there's a lot of ways. I mean, it's everywhere. It's from the food that we eat because of whatever, from the pollution that is resting on our food. So I think it's everywhere. It's not, and some people are more sensitive to that. Now, that's not the only reason. It's like autism. There's a proven link between, the triggering of autism or some mild form of autism related to EMF exposure in utero.
This is really important now, Sabine. My apologies for interrupting you. This is really important. And I was so glad you raised this in the film. The link between exposure, pregnant women being exposed to EMF, to microwave radiation, and that link then with autism in utero. This is cutting edge. Our listeners, some of them will be familiar with this and with these themes, but so many people won't be. This is why the film is so important. Talk to us about the link between autism and exposure to microwave radiation.
Now, I have to be. It is a loaded question, because autism is still a very unknown factor. Experts are mentioning exposure to toxic chemicals, to EMF, to the environment. I mean, there's a lot of things that can lead to having an autistic child. And so exposure to EMF or radio frequencies is not the only thing. There's nutrition, there's also the controversy around vaccines and mercury. So it's a very difficult subject. However, in doubt, I'm always about the precautionary
principle.
Yeah. Yes. And there is a group on Facebook called Autism and EMF where people can actually go and get it's a group, and they give a lot of information about the possible links between EMF and autism. What I do know for a fact, having experienced it myself with a friend and friends of friends who have children with either autism or learning disabilities, is that when they have less screen time and less exposure to radio frequencies, they are more in balance. And that's quite extraordinary. Actually, my executive producer was funding an experiment in a school in Northern California where he had asked the classroom to be EMF free, and compare it to another classroom, and I think it was a school with children with a lot of the learning differences, and just to conduct this experiment. I don't think they finished the experiment, but knowing from his experience, proofing his house, making it EMF free or as much as possible, has helped his family tremendously. So children or people who have children with learning disabilities or ADHD, autism, should really consider reducing screen time and definitely turning off the Wi-Fi at night, ideally hardwiring the computers or the iPad, because people often tell me, oh, you can't hardwire an iPad. Of course you can. There are adapters on Amazon for very cheap. Less than $20. I'm sure you can find an adapter where you can actually connect your iPad or your iPhone, if you're electrosensitive, to an Ethernet cable. So it is possible.
Sabine, are the schools open to this idea of returning to hardwiring? Because again, you and I being of a very similar age, we remember dial-up, don't we? When we dialed up to get online, we remember all that, the old days. Imagine saying dial-up now to a 15-year-old. She'd laugh in your face. But I was thinking, we remember when there was no wireless or Wi-Fi. You were plugged in. You had that cable, that Ethernet cable, plugged into your computer or your laptop. Bringing this information to schools, which I know you're really keen to do and you want to do because it's so vital. This is vital stuff, this. So important. GenerationZapped.com, folks. Get on the website and check out this film. What are the schools saying? Because I agree with you, it shouldn't be as difficult to hardwire all the computers in a school as maybe some people might think it is. What's the response you've been getting?
Oh, that's I haven't been very successful because schools think that it's very costly. A lot of schools are wanting the mobility for their children. It's really extraordinary. They value the mobility of the device within a classroom more than the health of the student, and that's really flabbergasting to me. But there is an easy way to hardwire, and then I'll get to the solution. If you can't hardwire, what can you do? So to hardwire, it can be done from the ceiling. All the cabling can be from the ceiling, and they can have drops of cables to plug in into the devices. Teachers and schools don't like that because it means that you have something dropping in the middle of the classroom or from the floor. But the easiest way technically is really like having a cable from the ceiling. So schools don't want to do that. They think it's expensive and that they're losing the mobility. Some schools tell you, oh, but you can't hardwire a wireless device, which actually you can. So if you can't do that, my solution, and I'm fortunate enough to have a school that has that is semi-embracing the message by accepting to raise awareness, knowing that they can't do the structural changes. It's not ideal, I grant you that, but it's already a step forward that students are given this chance for me to go and have a presentation. So what I tell them is, first of all, never carry your cell phone on your body. And you'd be surprised. Some girls are carrying their cell phones in their bra for 7 hours, and they're in the classroom on silent mode. And I'm like, do you realize what you're doing to your body? If only those girls knew to not put it in their bra and put it on airplane mode and turn it off. They're not even supposed to text in the classroom anyway. And actually in France, they have forbidden cell phones in schools as of this September.
That's right. That's a good point. Just on the carrying the cell phone in bras. I don't want to give the entire film away. I want people to watch the film. But you highlight a case in the film where a woman basically developed, you're pretty sure, and the people around her are pretty sure that she developed breast cancer because she carried the phone constantly in her bra. Do you want to talk about that for a second? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of ladies will, especially maybe if they're doing sports, maybe if they're at the gym, maybe if they're out walking and they don't want to carry it in a bag, maybe they're worried about losing the bag. I think a lot of women probably carry it in their bra. So talk about that just for a second. Vitally important, this.
Well, for instance, I admit sometimes I want to do use my Nike app. Although right now with Nike I have an issue because of the World Cup. But when I used to use the Nike app, and I didn't want to carry. I had my phone with me, but it's using GPS, and I would actually put it on airplane mode and put it in my pocket. I see that people can do that, but they need to be aware that they can use their apps when it's on airplane mode. It still emits a little bit of EMF from the battery itself, but at least it's not getting the signal to the cell towers, and that's very important. So I think that young girls should be aware of that. And when I did those seminars at the school that my kids go to, I had a few girls who told me, oh, but I carry my phone. I mean, and we're talking like 9th and 10th graders. So that's like around 15 and 16 years old, saying, oh, but I do that all the time. And if only they knew, they don't. And now sometimes I see the girls and they show me that they're not carrying their phone because it's been really life-changing for them. And same thing goes for boys. So my kids tell me, well, why do you want to put my phone? I don't carry a bag like girls do. I'm like, well, never mind. If you choose to have your a cell phone, you choose to turn off the cellular access, and when you do need to use it, you turn it on. This is really annoying on my end because I can't reach them when I need to.
Yeah.
But then at my generation, I didn't have a phone. I went traveling in Europe for 3 months in a backpack in my 20s. Cell phones were not existent, didn't exist then. And I was still fine. I would find a payphone, call every 3 days or whatever. So it's about that accessibility that we have to work as a parent. And I check in with them. I say, okay, you need to call me at, let's say if they go out at 8 p.m., you need to tell me where you're going to be. So we know that we set a time at which we text each other. And outside of this time, I'm figuring out, well, if he has a problem, he'll turn on his phone and call me. But it's hard for me to connect to them unless we set a time at which we need to connect. So that's the downside. But I'd rather have that than them being exposed to radio frequencies all day long. And I think that if parents knew that it had a disastrous health impact on their child, just like giving alcohol regularly to a 16-year-old affects his brain, they would have a different approach to cell phones.
There's no doubt about it. I want to just mention again, GenerationZapped.com. Just before we say goodbye, we're rapidly running out of time. It's been great to meet you today, and it was great to watch the film in advance so soon before we met and you came on the programme. I don't want to sound negative, but I can't not say this. This is brilliant work. Every parent should see it. Every child who's old enough to understand it should see it, and I'm urging people to see it. If 5G goes the way we think it does, and I've had academics on the programme speaking about it, we're in serious trouble, Sabine. Like as a race on this planet, we're in desperate trouble when this is rolled out. Go ahead.
We sadly are, we're sadly in a.
I know, and I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to be a downer because it's so important, and you touch on it, of course, in the film. The film is as up to date as it could possibly be, and yet, you know, in this country, and I can only speak for the UK, there is no discussion whatsoever about the possible adverse effects of this rollout. We've had one or two academics in the country put their hands up and say, well, why are we rolling this stuff out before we've done a human health impact study on it? And the media is just asleep. But again, thank God for filmmakers like you, in the absence of the media, to make films like this, that you said, you know, it mightn't have an impact on the 5G rollout. Well, maybe it will, you know, if enough people see the film and screen the film. So I don't want to end on a negative, but I just wanted to point that out there. Tell us about, I mean, this has obviously started you on a journey that is not coming to any end anytime soon, I wouldn't imagine. I'm sure there are going to be follow-ups, and you're going to be making films that are related to this particular subject. What's in the future for you, Sabine?
Well, I'm working on two. I have a few projects lining up. One on women in the Middle East, successful women in the Middle East. So hopefully I'll get that going.
Excellent.
Sometime soon. But I just want to come back to your 5G comment about us being in trouble. I agree with you, and I think that's why people need to be careful of what they bring in their home. I think it's a consumer issue. If people don't buy the product, then the product don't make it to the market, you know. I don't have an Alexa or an Echo in my house, and I think people need to evaluate the convenience of some devices compared to the health impacts of them. So I think even if we have 5G, it's a matter of controlling the use and setting limits to oneself.
Brilliant, the point you made about Alexa and stuff like that. You're absolutely right. People should also avoid smart meters like the plague, although the energy companies in this country are pushing them pretty hard on people at the moment. Folks, you've been listening to an extraordinary filmmaker. Sabine El-Gemayal has been on the programme live from Los Angeles. GenerationZapped.com is the website. I watched the film in total today. It's wonderful. It's a siren call, as I said earlier on, for parents, for children, for everybody. Watch it, screen it. I put a discount code on the Twitter. I pinned it to the top of my Twitter page so that when you go to buy the film, you can get 20% discount off it there. Sabine, it was a pleasure to have you on. Congratulations on a brilliant and very important film. I really mean that. And you're welcome back on this programme anytime. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you so much, Richie. Thank you for helping us raise awareness and bringing people to make changes in their lives. Thank you.
It was an honour, Sabine. Thanks. Have a great day there, even in LA. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Great stuff. Great to hear from Sabine there. It is GenerationZapped.com. Check it out. Watched it today. Stuck it on around about 3:15 and watched it right up to the beginning of the programme here at 5 p.m. Great film. The discount code is pinned to the top of the Twitter page. If you don't find it for some reason, send us an email, richie@richieallen.co.uk, or send me a tweet and I will make sure you get that discount code if you want to purchase the film. Vital that we continue to support independent filmmakers, documentarians like Sabine, putting out films like that, particularly brilliantly produced, top of the line production values. That's how we're going to get people who ordinarily will not listen to stuff like this, who ordinarily will turn a complete deaf ear to this type of subject. When you get brilliant production values, brilliant guests, she's filled her film with the most notable academics from right across US institutions, former World Health Organization people, telling you this stuff is not potentially, but probably fatal for you and for your children. This is the Richie Allen Show for Wednesday, September 5th. Back in a minute to tell you more.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back, Spirit Samba. Mark tweets, Mark, how are you? Richie, I saw a lady with her mobile in her bra a while ago, and I politely said to her that it was a dangerous thing. I was basically told to F off and mind my own business. Unbelievable, says Mark. You see, they still get very warm when you're on them. Very warm. The most recent models. My model is, I think, 6 months old now. It's a Samsung model. And I'm not endorsing Samsung, by the way. I'm just saying it's a Samsung model, a fairly new model. And if I'm speaking to somebody on it for more than 10, 12 minutes, it begins to get very, very, very hot. And it's a new model. That can't be good. It just can't be. Featured in the film, among many others, is Professor Ole Johansson, who's been on programmes with me over the years, although, for whatever reason, Ole has not been on this particular programme, but I was in touch with him some weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, to schedule something with him soon. Rick Simpson, of Rick Simpson Oil fame, will be on the programme real soon. Just to let you know, Tony Gosling returns to the programme tomorrow, Thursday, in the first hour of the programme. Keep in mind, if you're listening to this on podcast, or if you're listening to a repeat, but you ordinarily get it live, keep in mind the programme now broadcasts live at 5 p.m. UK time. That's 5 p.m. British summertime for the moment. Monday to Thursday on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and all the rest. All right. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm recording it, I'm doing it live, and then I'm getting the podcast online for about 7:15 p.m. UK time, but I'm immediately putting it out on a rolling loop on richieallen.co.uk as well. Doesn't seem to have caused too many ructions or problems, me going to 5 instead of 7. I suppose people are used to listening to radio programmes on commercial radio where the presenter might move sideways, might move up the schedule, might move down the schedule. Broadcasting at 9 p.m. might move to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It happens all the time. 4 years at 7 p.m. more or less, and it was time for a change. But as I said yesterday, whether it works is really subjective, and it's up to you. Loads of tweets on generationzapped.com. I've just been asked a question. I can't read out, or can I read out the code? Because I know there will be people listening to this later on, and they will go to Twitter and they won't find the tweet. I know this, so let me try and do it. If you go to generationzapped.com, that's where you can buy the film. Right. You can either watch it online, or I think you can get a hard copy of it. There is a 20% discount for Richie Allen Show listeners. And there is a there is a case-sensitive code. I am brutal. I couldn't organise a piss-up in a brewery. There is a case-sensitive code. Here it is. Capital I, lowercase GOT, capital Z, lowercase APPED, and then 20%. Right, that's the case-sensitive code for your 20% discount. Capital I, lowercase GOT, capital Z, lowercase APPED, 20%. There's no gaps. It's basically I got zapped 20% with the I and the Z higher case, right? Okay, because you might be listening to this on YouTube, you might be listening to it on Podomatic, you might be on iTunes and go, I can't find the discount. So it's I, capital I, GOT, lowercase, capital Z, APPED, 20%, right? Go and support filmmakers like Sabine El-Gemayal. What a wonderful guest she was. And this is as serious a subject as any that I've covered on this or any other programme at any time in the past. So that's kind of more or less all for today, I'm afraid. Flown by this programme. Big shout out to Dr. Stuart Waiton, top man from the University of Abertay, talking about the plans to make misogyny a hate crime and put it alongside racial hatred, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and why that's a bad thing. If you missed any of that, check it out online. The entire programme will be on Podomatic.com and iTunes in about 15 minutes time. That's a quite brilliant turnaround, isn't it, he says, immodestly, isn't it? It's a bloody good turnaround, is that. Going to leave you with some Coldplay today then to wrap up the programme, and a song called Viva La Vida. Please join me again tomorrow, Thursday at 5 p.m. That is BST 5 p.m. Again, that's 12 noon East Coast time. It is 9 a.m. Pacific time in California. And if you're in the Far East or in Australia, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. So you are. Figure it out yourself. Leaving you with Coldplay. See you tomorrow. Look after yourselves and one another. Thanks to Sabine El-Gemayal and, of course, to Dr. Stuart Waiton, PhD. See you tomorrow. Bye.